please welcome Catherine Mattice, founder and CEO, Civility Partners. How to continue your DEI work even if you can't call it DEI.
Wow, what an intro. In the back they said I want to scale a wall when I hear the music. I'm like, I don't get it, but now I get it. So we'll all scale walls later. How y'all doing? How was lunch? Did you sit out and listen to the music? What'd you do? Good deal. I holed up in the speaker lounge and hammered out some work. Okay, what prompted you to attend this session today? I'd love a couple answers. Why are we here talking about DEI without actually saying the dirty word? Yeah.
We're federally funded.
Yeah. So no diversity. Shh, don't talk about it. Yeah.
Because everybody needs to be counted for, and now they're not allowing us to make efforts to do that. So we're missing effort by organizations.
Yeah. Couple maybe from this side. What brings you in today? Yeah.
We also have federal grants, and then we received employee feedback recently that people are saying inappropriate things
Uh-oh.
about other cultures and races.
Okay, just smack them.
Yeah.
And I'm done. Here, have a great, no. What about this side? You all are quiet. Let's get one person from this side. Why are you here? I mean, I think there's drinks after if you want. All right, well, obviously, we're all here because we care about diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all the things, but diversity has become kind of a dirty word. And even when it's not, I think about my networking group, for example, and we talk about, obviously, bringing in more diverse people into the group, and you get some people going, well, as long as they meet, the standards. Like, do you know how misogynistic that sounds when you say that? Nobody's suggesting we bend the rules. We're suggesting that we need to go and find people who belong here, right? What do these words mean to you? What do these words mean? Yeah. 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 Yeah.
It's similar to equity in that you are outside of the box, you are thinking of the individual, what they need, and having the gist of it is agency.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to come up here and help me? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. 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 Thank you for that. Any other comments on this? Yeah. Yeah, where people feel like they can share and contribute. Okay, I think we're all in agreement. And certainly, to your point, diversity is a noun. It's about our differences, and it can mean a lot of things. Somehow it kind of got boiled down to gender and race, but those are kind of the two things that always seem to come up. But it's about a lot of different things, which is part of the reason we can't just drop it and not talk about it. So I want to tell you a little bit about why I'm giving this talk. So I started Civility Partners 17 years ago. I was internal HR, I was director, and I worked with an asshole. Has anybody worked with an asshole before? Okay. And he was not harassing. His behavior was not unlawful. He was a bully. And I started getting my master's degree while I was working there, and the universe was talking to me. My first two classes in grad school were ethnography, which is the study of something you're in, the researcher is in it, and the other class was called the dark side of communication, where we were learning about sibling rivalry and domestic violence, stalking. Side note, that professor was a stalking expert, and he always had a joke. You know, on my first date, I tell people I'm a stalking expert, and then they don't call me back. So that very first class, I thought, well, I'm going to write about work for ethnography, and I'll write about this toxic person for dark side, and that way it's one set of research for 2 papers. I ended up coming across the phrase workplace bullying while I was writing those papers, and discovered that actually at the time there was already 40 years of academic research on the topic of bullying, and actually a lot of other countries prohibit workplace bullying, which is essentially equal opportunity harassment, right? And I'll just clarify, harassment, of course, feels like a condition of employment, or it's so pervasive, it feels like to a reasonable person it would be intimidating, hostile, and abusive. That is also bullying. The only difference really is that harassment is unlawful, it's about protected characteristic, right? Bullying is the same behaviors, but it's legal. So if you want to harass, just harass everyone, and then that's your legal loophole. So I'm telling you all this because I am not a DEI expert, and I would never claim to be. I am a respectful, civil, thriving workplace expert, and we specialize in toxic work environments. And when I started 17 years ago, HR wasn't talking about bullying, and I had to convince people to let me speak at conferences. SHRM told me no for many years, and they finally let me speak. And so I was talking about being an upstander, dealing with bullying, way back when, before a lot of other people were talking about it. And so in a way, I've developed this trying to help HR be ninjas, right? Because you may not get permission to do an anti-bullying program, for example, or address a toxic leader because they bring results. Does that sound familiar? Some of us have those problems. And so I've always been about finding ways to help HR change the culture, even if they don't have a big budget or the CEO's permission. And so that's what this is kind of about. How do we talk about diversity and continue to do this work even when or if we can't actually say diversity? And we have several government clients who called us when all this was going down. We got to go through the slides one by one, make sure there aren't any bad words in there, right? And so I'm with you guys. So I want to talk too about, part of the problem is a lot of organizations have started to claim DEI was not that useful for them. They didn't see an ROI. It didn't really have an impact, and that's because they were doing it wrong, right? So a lot of organizations start with the right intentions, but they're doing it wrong, right? They're focusing on a quota of some sort. The training isn't effective. We get a lot of calls. We have a culture committee. Can you do a 50-minute training on inclusivity or implicit bias? And well, what happens after that? Nothing. We're just trying to do what we can. And so that's what goes along, or what's happening quite a bit. Some stats, 53% of the S&P 100 adjusted their DEI messaging. Big firms are saying DEI acronym is dropping. And 21% of those firms reduced or removed their metrics. And among companies who don't anticipate eliminating programs, they'll likely phase them out. So some maybe have said, we'll do it more quietly. And of course, you've heard these things before. I know I've had some serious arguments on Facebook with people when I've posted articles about DEI where they say things like that, right? Well, what about, and they love to cite California, we have to have a board of directors that has one woman on it for nonprofits, I think, right? And so that's an example of unfairness. And the answer to that is, well, maybe there's a lot of women. It's not giving an unqualified woman a position on the board. It's seeking out women who are qualified to be on the board because they didn't have the chance before when nobody noticed them, right? So, of course, you know this. I'm preaching to the choir. DEI is recognizing that various people have various talents and that some people don't get to show off those talents because of a characteristic. here's an example. Women occupy just 10% of the CEO positions at S&P 500 companies. 90% of successors already have connections, and they're men. So even though boards are saying we want women, they don't know where to go and find them. So as you know, this mission for a more diverse workforce and inclusive culture starts long before we go looking for a metric because we have a quota to fill. It's about facilitating the ability for women to be in these same positions that these men are so that they can also be on the boards. So we all know this is not about checking a box, it's not about quotas, it's not affirmative action. It's about understanding that treating everyone the same is not the right way to go about it. We have to remove the barriers. DEI is believing all of the research that shows cultural names are less likely to get a call back. So to give you that example, and I gotta admit, I have a cousin who loves to argue with me about DEI. And I'm like, you're a very intelligent person. Don't you read the research? And I'll cite something like this. Like, it's not about affirmative action. So this is an example. This is from, where is this from? I'm trying to see in my notes. I can't see. Oh, thank you. Sorry, usually I know where my sources come from. I'll have to find it. It's, Harvard Business School. That's where it's from. I knew it was reputable. Okay, can you make it bigger for me again so I don't have the notes? Thank you. No. Make the slide bigger. Thank you. So I could see the slide, not the notes. Thank you. So what they did was they had a set of graduate students have their resume, their normal resume in all its glory, and then they had a second version of the resume where they removed indicators of somebody's race. So they changed their name, maybe they were head of the Black Student Union, they just changed it to Student Union, right? So they made it, they whitened it, they tapered all that down. And what they found was that those whitened resumes got more callbacks. So this is about recognizing that all of those people, it's the same resume. How do we give those people the opportunity? So this doesn't have to be, it's not diversity because we have a quota. It's giving people the opportunity to show their skills. That's what it is. And so you don't have to say the word diversity. And again, I'm certainly not suggesting we shouldn't do it. If you can, have those difficult conversations about diversity. Have conversations about race. Have conversations about gender. But if you can't, you can talk about the fact that everybody needs to feel included and everybody who's qualified deserves the opportunity. I think it's an employer's moral and ethical responsibility to care. It's an employer's moral and ethical responsibility to create an environment where people feel good. Because what happens if they don't? If I hate my job, which I did once way back then, I go home, maybe I'm in a bad mood, I'm not interacting with my kids maybe the way I should be because I'm distracted. Maybe I drink a little too much. I go to bed early. I sleep in because I'm depressed. My partner isn't interested in hearing me complain about it all the time. And then it's a cycle. So now my family is kind of unhappy, and they go out into the community, and they're unhappy. Versus if I feel good at work, and I treat my kids and have lots of fun with them, and enjoy them, and my partner, and we go, they're taking that out into the community. So there's a domino effect for this. Another interesting point, so during COVID, I was, of course, doing a lot of webinars and things around kind of surviving it from a company culture perspective. Women are already doing the second shift, 75% of the unpaid work at home. During COVID, women were 1.5 times more likely than fathers to spend the extra time on the homework and the things that needed to happen at home with the kids. This one kills me. 76% of mothers said child care is their top concern, and only 54% of fathers did. So women are carrying this extra load. So let's talk about where this stuff goes wrong. We talk about workplace culture through what we call the oil model: organizational behavior, individual behavior, and leadership behavior. And you know, I've been talking about those three things for a long time. It just occurred to me it spelled oil like a year and a half ago. I was like, we got to rebrand, car, everything. So a lot of times, culture consultants talk about the individuals. And I hear it all the time, like, oh, I do culture. Well, what do you do? Oh, I do manager training and things. And yeah, that's part of it, but that's not culture work. That's teaching individuals. A culture consultant is focused on all three of these parts. The organization has to behave in ways that facilitates the individual behavior they seek. And then leadership, of course, has to behave in ways that are in alignment. So these three things have to be aligned. My second and very last car metaphor. Okay, so here's an example of why DEI programs might have failed, and these organizations are saying it didn't work. We don't see any ROI, despite the thousands of research articles that a diverse leadership team, for example, creates more revenue or has more revenue. So, you know, maybe the organization says, sure, we can have a DEI committee, and the committee said, well, we should add inclusivity to our core values. So they did. They maybe audited their recruiting efforts or said that they would, but there's a lot of fires, and so HR maybe never got around that. And then you do hire some candidates, but then nobody's really focused on including them, so it doesn't work out. And so then you have these individual behaviors where some people are focused on it, some people think it's bull honky, some people care, but they're not talking about it. And maybe they had, you know, a committee, they're not being paid extra for it. And then, of course, the leadership team maybe doesn't educate themselves and doesn't really pay attention. They're just allowing it because the employees wanted to do it. So this is the fail. Does this sound familiar to some of the stuff you've seen? Yeah. So when we work with organizations, again, we're not DEI, but we work on culture, we're focusing on these, aligning these three things. So for example, inclusivity is added to the core values, but it's also a core competency that people are measured on. Now it's not performative. We're auditing our recruiting efforts and following through. We're ensuring those people that are hired do feel included. Individual behavior means that the leadership team has agreed to put budget toward influencing individual behavior through things like training, hiring a DEI consultant to help, having conversations about where the systems are broken. So that is what DEI work looks like. That is an example of things being aligned. Does this make sense? Okay. So whether you call it, and this is kind of the whole point of this talk, right? Whatever you call it, we need to create environments where people feel included. And I've been saying that for 17 years as an, you know, workplace bullying, toxic work environment person. So if you're not able to use that dirty word, you can talk about we need respect. And I know everybody gets on Gen Z because why? They demand respect. And we go, how dare they? At least in my older generation. I don't, other people do. And I'm like, they're onto something. They're demanding respect. Why wouldn't they? Kudos. Can't wait for that all to unfold in the workplace so that I don't have to have a job anymore. I can do something else. So one of the things I see HR do with a lot of these different initiatives is you have your employee engagement initiatives, you have your DEI initiative if you did, you have your employee experience initiative, and all of these things are sort of in buckets. And that is not how it should be. It's employee engagement is about getting people excited, which means they have to feel like they belong, which means They have to have a good onboarding experience, which means, so all of this stuff is connected. So it's really about culture. So let's stop putting things in buckets. And I say the same thing about toxic behavior. Toxic behavior is on a continuum. So we tend to ignore the incivility, the sarcasm, the microaggressions, this behavior that is subtle and it's not so overt as, blatant sexual harassment. And we don't really have policies around it. It's not against the law, but those behaviors harm your inclusive work environment. So then we go on and we have our harassment prevention classes, and that class is all about what to do if you're harassed. I've yet to really see a program that's actually talking about prevention, because a prevention harassment class would be talking about all of those other behaviors and how to stand up to them. Truth is, research shows in terms of workplace bullying, there's an initial incident, which would be uncivil of some sort, an eye roll in a meeting, for example, and that one little moment in time, if the person on the receiving end doesn't step in, it unfolds over time, and it becomes more and more frequent and more aggressive, and maybe a year later, that person who had somebody rolled their eyes at that meeting, now that person's being bullied and they're traumatized and developing PTSD. So all of that behavior can evolve into more toxic work, or more toxic behavior. So psychological safety is a basic human need, DEI program or not. We are human creatures, and we require to feel valued by other people. It impacts our self-esteem. We require other people to value us, just like we require food and water and sleep. And we push it to the side because we know when we're thirsty or tired or hungry. But we need this stuff just the same. We need to feel valued. And it's like, well, just put your head down and get some water and keep working. That's the old way of work. These Gen Zers, man, they're coming through. I'm not doing that, right? And of course, all these little behaviors can harm psychological safety. And you know this, it's hard to hear of things like Google's research where they found that psychological safety was the #1 factor in effective teams. And then you have over here other big companies saying, well, we don't see any use, or hasn't helped our business in any way or our bottom line. It's frustrating. So at the end, I'm going to show you a QR code, and I have several resources throughout that I'll mention. So I'm just going to kind of show you what they are, and then you can get them at the end with the QR code. So I have this little building self-awareness. It doesn't have diversity on it anywhere, so you can pass it around the office without getting in trouble. This is an example of something you can do that seems small, but influences culture, because culture doesn't start at the top. If I just meet you and I'm like, oh, what do you do? What's it like to work there? Nobody ever says, well, the CEO created a culture like this. What you describe is your daily interactions. You say things like, oh, I love my team, my manager's kind of an idiot, but it's all right. I don't like the CEO, but you're talking about the interactions you have. So culture doesn't start at the top. It starts in those daily interactions. So download this, pass it around, have the people on your team, have managers use it with their teams, fill out this little questionnaire, and then have a conversation about it. That's a daily interaction that will have a huge impact on culture. That's how you shift culture, through those little things. Another thing, not mine, but it'll be in the downloads. This is from the Health and Human Services. And so I love this because it's a government agency, and somehow they've still gotten away with some of this. I know there's a lot on here. Let me see if I can point it out to you. I might have to come down here so I don't fall off the stage. Is this the pointer? I don't know. Work-life harmony. Well, I'm a single mom, so I need work-life harmony. Mattering at work, a culture of recognition. That sounds a little like diversity and inclusion, right? And then connection and community. Create cultures of inclusion and belonging. So I would suggest this is similar to the oil model in that it's talking about these various areas. This is not put things in a box. This is about basic human needs. And it's kind of fascinating, isn't it, that in the old days, work was about a paycheck. And humans, over time, we started to demand, no, a paycheck's not going to cut it. I also want to feel like I matter. And employers everywhere are like, what? And that's why I have a job. I would say I shouldn't have a company called Civility Partners turning around toxic environments, yet somehow I do. So, it's just about humans. It's the same conversation that HR is having anyways, about getting a seat at the table, focusing on the humans. We're not cogs in a wheel. So this is stuff that you can still talk about without getting into trouble and losing funding. So some business cases for you. When employees trust that they and their colleagues will be treated fairly, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, or age, they are 10 times more likely to look forward to going to work. None of those Sunday scaries. 6 times more likely to have pride in their work, and 5 times more likely to want to stay at their company. There's a business outcome for this. Other business outcomes, companies in the top 25% for racial, ethnic, and gender diversity are 36 and 25% more likely to have superior financial returns. There's that business case that some companies are claiming they never saw, and that's because they did it wrong. Companies with above average diversity scores drive 45% average revenue from innovation compared to those with below average diversity scores. So if we're going to create respectful work environments, we have to look at the risk factors. Even if you're just talking about harassment prevention and not using the words you're not supposed to use. There's tons of research that says employers do things, unintentionally usually, that facilitate the opportunity for bad behavior to happen. So even if you sort of couch this as a harassment prevention situation, because you can't talk about inclusivity, this is part of that. So for example, research shows that in very bureaucratic organizations like the government, are a lot of you in the government? I'm kind of assuming so because you're here, no? Or funded by the government. So, okay, so in a bureaucratic organization where there's a lot of rules and regulations and red tape, there is more risk for bad behavior. Because, for example, if I'm going to bully you and we work together, I can use all those rules and regulations as a tool. Oh, you need a new parking pass? Well, that's going to take me a while to get because I have to go through all, right? And then I can withhold it, and it's easy to hide. So bureaucracy creates the risk. Questions about what's on here? Anything look familiar that you want to discuss? Questions about what you see? The young workforce. So when you have an organization that's made up of mostly 25-year-olds or even like a team, 25-year-olds are less likely to be married. Their hormones are certainly going, bigger than someone like me who's 46. They are less experienced with professionalism. So, and again, these are risk factors. I'm not saying if you have this, you absolutely have a risky environment. I'm just saying it creates risk, which means that you have to spend some time looking at these risks, doing a risk analysis, and finding ways to minimize them. Other questions, or I'd love to hear if one of these resonates with you to share it. Yeah, go ahead. Did you raise your hand?
I was curious about monotonous work.
About what?
Monotonous work.
So if you have like a manufacturing line, for example, where you're doing the same thing all the time, the brain gets bored. You start harassing other, I say that jokingly, but you start, maybe joking, being sarcastic. You've got to do things to entertain yourself. And if it's not being managed, creates a risk for bad behavior. Yeah? Many long-term employees. Remember, it's not officially a problem, it's just a risk. So when you have a lot of long-term employees, you create opportunities for cliques to form, for people to say, we already tried that, youngin', new person, it didn't work, we're not doing that. So again, it doesn't equate to risk, absolutely, but it creates the risk, and so it's something to monitor. Other questions, comments about these? So my action item for you is to take a picture of this slide, bring it to a meeting, and talk through it. Figure out where do we have these risks, and how can we minimize them to the best of our ability. I just did a talk a couple weeks ago at a safety conference, and I talked about doing this just like you would do something in a manufacturing or construction. If we're in construction, what creates risk for somebody, driving the bulldozer off a cliff? Where's the risk for that? Well, we got to give them training. And they go through this whole process of looking at risk through physical safety lens. We can do the same for psychological safety. And again, if you can't say those words, you can certainly talk about harassment prevention in doing this exercise. My clicker stopped working. Can you help me? Help! It's not working. Oh, I was pushing the wrong button. User error. Something else I want to talk about to minimize risk is investigations versus assessments or surveys. So what happens when somebody files a complaint? They say, I have been hearing racial slurs and I'm filing a complaint. What do? Someone tell me. It's been a long time since I've been in HR. What do? You get the full statement, like Law and Order. The dun-dun. Let me get the spotlight out. And then what do?
I think you start off by using your EEO funnel to identify if there's been any immediate violations, if there were any witnesses, to then support that.
Yep. So maybe you do an investigation if you need, right? Again, Law and Order. It's about understanding if something unlawful happened. And it's about that particular thing as if it exists in a vacuum. Here's a question for you. What's the #1 reason people don't report harassment? Retaliation. Why are they afraid of retaliation? Yes. So that's the point. When I feel like retaliation. It's the #1 reason, according to SHRM. But we just sort of accept it. Yeah. Retaliation, I'm afraid of retaliation too. I think a better question is, if retaliation is unlawful, why are people afraid of retaliation in your organization? What are you doing or not doing that creates fear for retaliation? Because people should feel perfectly comfortable to talk to you. I'll tell you, and I talk about this kind of at length in my book, HR has a really bad rap. Obviously, I get a lot of toxic workplace Instagram posts. That's my algorithm. And all of it, all those comments, don't you dare tell HR. They are not your friend. And so you have a little bit of a bad rap. And I'm trying to help you, I promise. I'm always in there like, that's not true. They're kind of stuck. And I have a whole chapter on for somebody who's in a toxic work environment, kind of like assessing your HR professional's ability to help you by looking at where are they in the organization? Do they report to the CEO or the CFO? That makes a difference. Do they show up at things? Are they stoic? Are they more friendly? Do they walk around and people know them, or they hide? So we have to get good at HR like helping people recognize that you can talk to me. And I think what HR needs to be doing is making it clear that you can call me when it's a microaggression. You can call me when you have conflict with somebody, and I will coach you through it. Don't come to me 3 years later after it's escalated, and I'm the principal's office where you report things. Let me be your partner. That's what HR should be doing. So the point is, we treat complaints like they're contained. But again, we have to ask ourselves, why did this person come to work and think it was okay to say or do that? What's going on in our organization that gave somebody permission? I'm going to tell you a kind of a gross story. I was an expert witness in a court case for a fire department, and this woman was suing the department for sexual harassment and the fire chief for sexual harassment. And I was deposed by the fire chief's lawyers because they, of course, wanted to prove that I wasn't an expert. And I remember he says to me, the lawyer, he says, the fire chief isn't the one who actually committed sexual harassment. Don't you think he is not at fault? And I reminded him, one of the things that happened to this woman was a man came to work and put something gross in her coffee cup, if you know what I mean. No. Yes. Stick with me, I got all sorts of stories. And so my answer back to the lawyer was, if somebody came to work and did something that's so awful, they had permission. They thought to themselves, this is funny. People will think it's funny. And that is exactly the fire chief's fault, right? So we need to do surveys to understand the culture. No, it's settled. She didn't know who it was who left the stuff in the cup, but it was just one of many incidents for her. Yeah. The other actually kind of funny thing, we're in California, this was in Texas, and the lawyer, this is total side note, but they had gotten an HR audit, and that HR person had suggested harassment prevention training, which they don't have to do in Texas, so this was a suggestion. And so I mentioned that, and the lawyer said, well, the audit was only 6 months ago. That takes a long time to set up, da-da-da-da. And I said, no, you can open your laptop. We can buy one online, and we can make the transcript part of this deposition. He was like, so I didn't let them get away with anything. The point is, investigations are really focused on facts and on a very specific scenario. But if we zoom out a little bit and say, well, why did this happen in our organization? The answer to that question is going to lie in a survey that looks at everybody's perceptions. I don't look at facts. I live in a world of perceptions. So here's some questions for you. Does your survey assess whether or not people feel appropriately challenged and recognized? Does it ask about feeling like people belong? And again, you don't have to use any of those dirty words you're not allowed to use. You can talk about psychological safety. You can talk about, do you feel included? Do you feel valued? Do people feel like they can be their whole selves or not? I'm also going to share a fun fact with you. How many of you do engagement surveys? Okay. Just so you know, an engagement survey doesn't measure your culture. Engagement is an outcome of culture. So you can't tie them together. So I'll give you an example. This was a client who, usually our surveys aren't quite so detailed, but this was a university IT department of 900 people. It was mostly men. 5 women came forward. They had filed a harassment and a bullying complaint. I don't know what a year and a half had gone by and still no resolution to the investigation. Anyway, so these 5 women said, well, forget you, we're going to take this public and make it open. We're going to force you to fix this for us. Kudos to them. So they hired us because of the nature of it. We went through and we did a survey on all these different constructs. Take a look at bullying. Females, on a scale of 1 to 5, are 4 at bullied, which meant weekly. 5 is daily. But their engagement's also at a 4. And then 18 months later, we had helped the organization eliminate the bullying or minimize it quite a bit for both genders, but the engagement stayed exactly the same. Theoretically, engagement should have gotten higher. So you can be in a toxic work environment and engaged simultaneously. And that's because you might like your job, the things you're doing, the people that are right around you. You care about the mission. Engagement is enthusiasm. So you can be enthusiastic and still have an asshole of a boss. So just something to think about. So what you need is a climate assessment, not an engagement survey. A climate assessment is about culture. Climate assessments are a snapshot in time of your culture. Our survey looks at engagement, job satisfaction, psychological safety, internal communication, which I have yet to see on an engagement survey, but how frustrating is it when communication doesn't work? That's another risk factor. And then relationships. And that's where we're asking, do you feel valued? Do you feel like your manager trusts you? Do you trust your manager? Those kinds of things. And so that was what happened with the IT department at the university. When we first got there, they were like, we just can't imagine how this happened. We've been doing the Gallup Q12 for years, and we always get like 4.8 and so on. And, looking back at, we have our own engagement construct. And in fact, the organization was engaged. But Gallup was keeping information from them. Actually, this survey also showed, we asked a question about, had you witnessed harassment in the last year? 30% of the workforce said yes. But they also had 4.8 Gallup scores. So once you have your survey data, then you need to have an action plan, right? Those of you that do the engagement surveys, do you have, what do you do with the data? Yeah. Okay, you develop an action plan. Who develops it? You develop it. Okay. How's that working for you? Must be a lot of work. Yeah, and then what happens to the action plan? Okay, and you're managing things getting done?
Kind of like project managing.
Okay.
Leadership and
Okay. Anybody else want to share? What do you do after your surveys? Yeah.
We have a leadership team made up of the 3 owners and the 4 other department heads.
Okay.
So everybody's involved as a team.
Okay, good. So I'll just tell you what we do and what we find works. That sucks for you that you're doing that by yourself. How much progress do you make in between surveys?
It's actually things that we focus on. We do make progress.
Okay.
It does include me getting leadership buy-in, which I have been able to do.
That's good. Okay, yeah, the leadership behavior in our oil model. So what we do is we take a group of employees, 8 of them. There's only 1 leader on the action team, and that's how we create buy-in, so that it's not the leaders going off or one person. That's mind-boggling that you do that. So it's 7 people from different departments, different demographics, different levels, and 1 leader who's kind of communicating with the leadership team, right? But that way, the plan is created by the employees, and it's not a closed-door meeting. Then we have a meeting, they go out into their workforce and talk about what we've been discussing, socializing it, getting feedback, and we have another meeting, and we talk through what did people learn, so that the whole workforce is kind of participating in the action plan. And so, for example, some of your strategies might be, using a diverse panel of interviewers. And actually, so when we did a plan at this IT department, it was UC Berkeley. It's on their website. It's on our website. I'll just say it. We actually, the action team went out and asked for ideas about things, and somebody said we need to have a place where we can recruit from. So everybody in all 900, they were all invited. Here's the place. If you have an idea of a place we could recruit when we are hiring, put it on there. So then you got the LGBTQ community center on there, and so then it creates a lot of opportunity for people who may not have necessarily been applying before. Having mentoring programs, again, great for inclusivity, great for just people too. Training, access to child care, elder care services, and so on. Healthcare options. So just to give you another example of this is more generic of a survey that we did. This is a Rainbow Water District down near San Diego where I live. This is what we can do with an action team, and we usually do it in 12 to 18 months. So you can have a lot of impact. Things can move quicker if you're doing this with a team of employees who are taking some of this on. What do we think? Does this sound like something we could accomplish? Something that you could do? The worst thing you can do is, why are you smiling at me? I feel like you're like, I don't know.
I think so. I think we can. But my big question is like, hire.
Yeah. But you can do it yourself too. If you're the leader on the action team, you put out a call. So what we usually do is just like a Google form, if you want to apply. Other ways we've done it is the leaders will say, well, these are the people we'd like to have on it because they're natural leaders and champions and people gravitate towards them. Those are the kind of people you want, right? You don't want the people who are the naysayers. So definitely watch out for that. We actually it was at that IT department. We had a couple people who were very focused on race and one of their ideas was all 900 people needed to read White Fragility. And it's like, that's a great idea. There's no way to implement that. And we had another person on the team who was blind, and she kind of just got to a point where it was like, this always comes back to race, and there's so many other things. Like, I'm kind of being ignored. I don't want to be on the team anymore. So it's important to make sure you have the right mix of people.
Yeah, and I think too, like when I started mine, I did baby steps.
Yep.
Don't go out to a 50-page survey.
Yep.
Everybody's gonna, shoot you down or whatever. I think the small one, do 5 questions.
Yeah.
Do, 4, that kind of thing. And I think that then you.
You're welcome.
That has something to build on when you start the survey.
Yep.
The next one, maybe add a few more questions and your routine.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, start small and just say we're making some progress, right? And our action plans are quite long, but that's because we're there to help the client. If you're doing this on your own, small steps. What are the few high impact things we can do? Some other tips for you: always deliver training in pairs. So if you're going to do any sort of training about interpersonal skills, implicit bias, psychological safety, respect, inclusiveness, being an upstander, any of those topics, you do the interpersonal skills for everybody, and then the managers and supervisors and leaders get a part 2 that's creating it, right? So if you do a training on psychological safety for everybody, then the managers need training on how to lead a team and build psychological safety. So you've got to do things in pairs. Okay, so this is another item that's in your downloads with the QR code at the end. And I have a picture of this showing compassion. Again, culture really unfolds in those daily interactions. And even if your leader is like, we're not doing any of this stuff, managers can influence their own teams. Individuals can influence their own teams. So this is an example. You could ask chat, give me some ideas on conversation starters for team meetings, and start asking people to do that. So this is an example, right? To what extent do you openly express being vulnerable? That's important to inclusivity. Do you show empathy and compassion? And so just having people in a team meeting pair off and talk about something like this, and then having a group or having a group debrief on it. Okay, so again, if I don't think culture comes from the top, I hate that saying. And the other saying I hate is culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's nails on a chalkboard for me. Because there's a lot of messed up organizations that do just fine, right? Despite their culture. So, you know, really managers can craft the culture, really empowering managers to coach people who gossip, for example. Gossip is an exclusive behavior. I saw her eyes widen up. We'll talk after. Do you need a book? So gossip is exclusive. It makes people feel bad. It's the opposite of bringing people in and helping them feel valued. So do your managers know that they should step in when there's gossip? I'm going to guess not, based on my experience. And even if you had said you should deal with that, do they even know how? Because I'm sure you've had conversations like this where you've said to someone, you know, I'm hearing that you're gossiping. Can we talk about that? What's their answer? No, I don't. This will change your life. You guys got to get out of the fact thing. Yes, do facts when you need to. Your response to that is, I understand you feel that way, but I am hearing from people that there is a perception that you gossip. And they'll say, well, that's their reality, that's their problem, they're just being sensitive. And you say, but there's a problem with that perception. It's a performance problem when your team perceives you as gossiping. So don't try to argue with them. You just say, look, the one fact I know is people perceive you this way. And so I coach toxic leaders, and sometimes I'll say, you know, they'll say things like, well, that's their reality. And I'm like, look, I interviewed 15 people, and they all agree that they perceive you as shaming them in public. So sure, it's their reality, but it's like your reality versus the 15. Who would you believe if you were me? So I also have an upstander training that I suggest for you. It'll be, the link to it will be in the QR code. This is super important to inclusivity, respect, a thriving work environment, psychological safety, whatever words you want to say or can't say. People need to feel comfortable to say, hey, you know what? Yesterday in that meeting, I felt like you were getting after me in front of everybody, and it was kind of embarrassing. Could we talk about that? And ideally, the person says, yes, let's talk about it. I'm so sorry. That may not happen, of course, but teaching people that they should and have the ability to do that, and you encourage them to do it. Like during Me Too, employers everywhere, if you see something, say something. I'm like, they're not going to say anything. And what are they supposed to see? Of course, you know, it's like you can't just say it. So teaching people to do that. And so when we do the upstander class, we talk a lot about how being an upstander could even just be making yourself known to change the vibe. You don't have to step in and be like, stop it. So there's a lot of ways to be an upstander. Here's how you could turn your core values into core competencies. So things like inclusivity. This is also in your QR code. I have several examples. I have teamwork in there, inclusivity in there. But you can create core competencies around your core values, and then you hold everybody accountable to them. This is an example of us doing that for a client. And of course, you're going to lose talent. So if you do need that business case, again, Gen Z is coming in hot. We are, back in college, they used to call it the Browning of America. I think that's probably not PC now, but you know, that we're mixing races. So race is going to, we're mixing races. So maybe we need to address this in our workplaces. Gen Z and Millennials say same-sex marriage is good for society. Gen Z Republicans are more likely than Republicans in older generations to say blacks are treated less fairly. So Gen Z pays attention. They grew up with the internet, so they can see how the world works long before the workplace, unlike people like me. Issues that have arisen between Gen Z and older employees, according to managers, number one is conflict about attitude, communication issues, differing priorities. So you know, Gen Z is coming in and saying, I want you to communicate with me. I want to feel valued. I need to know what your expectations are, but don't order me around. Conscious unbossing and quiet quitting, of course, are words that we hear these days. Gen Zs don't want to take on management roles. So if your organization, give me 1 second, if your organization isn't paying attention to this stuff and we continue to not train managers, Gen Z will continue to turn those roles down. Why don't they want to be managers? They don't like what they see. Why would I be a manager? I watched my parents struggle. We didn't really have that much more money than before they became a manager. I see my boss look stressed out. They're working all the time. They don't have the tools and the resources. Nobody trained them how to deal with gossip, and they're still stuck dealing with it. They don't want the stress. Gen Z is, the research is really showing they are much more interested in a lifestyle that is very work-life integrated, is the word I use. They want to be able to travel. They want to be able to sleep in if they want. They want to work their own hours. And of course, these two, you're like, yeah. Like, what's wrong with that? The older generation's like, how dare they? I'm like, sounds great to me. So let's embrace this new way of work, right? So just to finalize this, Civility Partners is certainly here to help you. I'm happy to just have conversations with you as well, no pressure. But if you're curious, we do workforce surveys. Of course, we create action plans, lots of training, coaching for toxic rock stars, as we call them, and conflict mediation. Over the years, we've served a lot of industries, including government and nonprofits funded by the government and so on. I have a couple books, so I'll give a couple more out. And I have a book signing up by the registration right after this, if you care to come up and meet me up there. The dummies over at Wiley asked me to write the book, so that was pretty cool. So there's your QR code. Again, if you do that, you will get, or you can just email info at, we'll send you all the resources that I had shown throughout the slides. And thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Oh, and you had a question, too. You go first, and then I'll get you. Yes?
Well, I want to thank you for, I don't think there's, people say perception is everything. I think it's the only thing.
Yeah.
And if you perception is I work a lot with people to see the amazing parts about them. But sitting here and you talking about it, I realize one of the reasons why they have a bad rap is because they make us uncomfortable with the truth.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, good point. Thank you. The other hand I saw. There was another hand. Yeah?
Yeah, me two things. I'd love to get a book.
Okay.
But I wanted to kind of echo what you were saying early on in the presentation about a name on a resume and how it's identified.
Yeah.
My husband, for example, his name is Clayton, and so he applied for a position.
Oh.
When he went for the interview, they automatically assumed that he was a white guy, and this is in Florida, so even the panel let him know that initially they called him in because they thought he was a white guy.
They said that?
They did share, but of course he's in Florida, and then after
They're like, we could say whatever we want here.
and he did get the job, but once he started, they shared with him what their jobs were, and they were thinking it was the last position, it was the last person they had to extend the offer to that person, and they were hoping that he was a white guy, but they were happy with the fact that he got it. But it's true, it's real bad. Your name is really.
Yeah, thank you for that very clear example. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll hang out for a couple minutes, and then if you want to come up and chat with me, I'm doing a book signing. And if you have a really toxic, horrible work environment, I will give you a book. Or you can buy them upstairs.